Board. Okay. Hi, everyone. This is C.R. Barclay, Senior Admissions Counselor for the Ohio State University here at Newark campus. And this is another edition of my Moments with the Faculty. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Tiyi Morris, Associate Professor of African and African American Studies here at the university. Dr. Morris is the author of Women Power Unlimited, um, and she has been with our faculty for how long, Dr. Morris?
This is my 15th year.
Your 15th year on campus. And what I wanted to ask you about, and as my viewers have heard me say before with other segments, normally when I have a question about anything, rather than me Googling it, I get up from my chair and I walk upstairs and I walk down the hallway of faculty row and I find the expert in that field. And Dr. Morris, with all that has happened over the past 6 to 8 months, the uprising in the summer, the elections, and the aftermath, my question is it possible for a group to have protest, a protest march, and peacefully enact any type of change from those marches, from those rallies?
I think ideally the answer most people want to hear is that yes, peaceful protest is the best way to go about enacting change. But I think that history demonstrates that that oftentimes is not sufficient, right? So if we think about the civil rights movement, a movement that was centered around advocating for equality and inclusion for Black people, the cornerstone strategy was nonviolent direct action. And although
Okay,
that did result in the passage of some legislation, the implementation wasn't always there. That legislation, those policy changes were not sufficient to significantly impact the quality of life for the masses of Black people. So when we think about what types of changes were made, they weren't always the changes that those activists were seeking, or at least not the degree to which they were seeking. And so when we think about contemporary society and the efforts to disrupt business as usual, which is what those demonstrators were attempting to do, similar
right?
to the demonstrators in the 1960s, that is only going to get us so far, right? Because we're talking about not just disrupting business as usual for a day, but really trying to disrupt the entire system of white supremacy on which this country was built. And that, unfortunately, is going to require more than just peaceful protest because those who hold social, political, economic power in this country do not want to give it up. And a couple of demonstrations peacefully in the street have already shown us that that isn't sufficient to get them to give that power up and to redistribute wealth and to, you know, engage in true democracy in this society, right? That's just not, unfortunately, going to happen at this point
But
as a
there,
result of peaceful protest. Yeah.
okay. So on that line, there has got to be a way, especially for the the young people that are looking at this today. There's got to be a way in which to be able to move forward, but be able to do it in a way that stays within the rules that have been laid out. Or are you saying there is no way without changing the rules?
I guess I'm saying a couple of things. I'm not saying abandon peaceful protest. I'm saying that
Mm.
peaceful protest in and of itself is not sufficient,
It's not
right?
enough. Okay.
Is not enough. Um, and I'm also not saying that I support what happened at the Capitol, right? Because those are two completely different scenarios, right? The peaceful protest of Black folk and allies who are fighting for equality in society versus the riot that happened at the Capitol that was attempting to unlawfully maintain in the seat of the president someone who had not been elected, right? And so those are two completely different things. So one of the things I'm trying to say is that yes, engage in peaceful demonstration, but don't think that's all you can do, right?
O-
Electoral politics is necessary. Being on the ground, doing day to day work and community building and institution building is also necessary. Acquiring
Okay.
power so that you have the power to change institutions is also necessary. So it can't just be from the position of being in a protest and saying, this is what we're asking for, this is what we're demanding. Part of it has to be you getting in that position of power and saying, these are the changes that I'm going to make. And so that's what I mean when I say peaceful protest isn't sufficient. That's not going to be the path to get us to where we want to be as far as a democratic and equitable society.
Okay. So if if I understood you correctly, councilman, mayor, or councilship, mayorship, um, volunteering within the community, um, uh, directors of the given societies that go on, the clubs, organizations that help foster community within a city or within a town. That's what is that what you're saying? That those
All of
type of
that. Hmm.
that's a lot.
It's a lot, but
That's a
these
lot.
are decision making bodies, right? If you think about the school board, if you think
Yep.
about your city council, if you think about who is on the Parks and Recreation board, right? Um, all of these entities and communities around the country are making decisions. And if Black people and other people of color are not in those decision making bodies, then policies will continue to be implemented that marginalize and discriminate against minoritized people. So it's about acquiring power.
Okay. If there was a starting point, I mean, because again, the folks that are looking at us or looking at this video today um, are 17, 18, 19 years old. How do they get started? What would be the logical first step? I mean, because again, for lack of a better word, we've seen the wrong way to go about it. What would be what is a logical and reasonable first step for someone that is under 21?
Mhm. So I'll give you a couple examples from high school students in Central Ohio. Um, Students at Worthington in the Worthington School District had a Zoom teach-in over the summer around SROs, school resource officers,
Okay.
and how SROs in schools have been shown to basically perpetuate and support the pipeline to prison because those SROs disproportionately discipline, penalize students of color. So they were successful in having the SROs removed from their high schools. That's one example. And again, that was an initiative that was led by high school students. In Westerville City Schools, there was a group of high school students who um, were pushing back against a couple of the texts that are taught in ninth grade English. One of the texts was To Kill a Mockingbird. And so students of color, Black students in particular, were upset because of the way it was taught, the ways that white students use that as an opportunity to say the N word, and the fact that teachers were not effective in kind of disrupting that. And really, they weren't effective in teaching a text that centers around the Southern, racial climate. So there was that book and another book, and they met with school officials um, in order to not have that book taught in English this year. And they were effective. It's still an ongoing process. The curriculum hasn't officially changed, but they were effective in not having there were two books. The other one was of Mice and Men, not having them taught this year. right? So you start where you are in your community, and with the issues that are, I hate to say impacting you because then people become disconnected from the struggles of oppression that are impacting all people, but that are in your environment, right? That you can immediately have an impact on. The students who were leading that initiative around the books, they were upper class students. So the majority of them were juniors and seniors, right? And they were focused on ninth grade English because they remember their experience. And so, again, finding what is relevant, what is tangible for you to address in your community and start there. And there's so many issues in the schools, right? I'm sure that many of you saw the Instagram posts this summer that focused on students of color and LGBT students talking about the experiences of discrimination that they were facing in their schools, right? So
They were
there are
very
so
powerful.
right, there's so many issues happening in the schools that students have the power to address, right? And if they speak up on those issues and then get their parents to join them, that is going to be a significant enough force to cause the school district to respond.
Perfect. Okay. So going on another track, but still within that area, I know from the young people that I have living that lived in my house. Thank God I now have my house to myself, but just me and my wife and our dog now. But the social media climate, with the Twitter, with the Snapchat, with the Instagram, with the other one that the other one that the kids are using.
TikTok.
Thank you. How I think I know the answer to this question, that it is a very powerful medium, and and a young person would rather get their information that way than talk to someone that, like me, that has lived through some of it, like you or like your parents that were actually in the civil rights movement. How do how does a young person use the medium now to raise awareness or move the cause along, or something that they feel very strongly about? How do you use that for good rather than putting a spin on something that doesn't even exist, i.e., fake news?
hmm I think social media can be useful, um, but within limitations, right?
Okay.
That can't be the end of it. So just tweeting out a hashtag or, posting a story on Instagram, those are good to raise awareness to a certain extent, but that can't be the end of activism. You can't build a movement around just a hashtag, right? You can't build a movement. Um, well, let me rephrase that, right? Because
A
Black Lives
committed,
Matter and Say Her Name was built around a hashtag, but that can't be the end of it, right? You can't just have a social movement on social media. So you
oh,
can use that as an impetus for mobilizing and engaging people, but building a social movement requires on the ground organizing. It requires building relationships with people. It requires strategy and goals. And it's day to day work building a movement. And that simply cannot be done via social media. And so that's one of the things. The second thing that I think young people need to recognize is that there were successful social movements from the previous generation, well, I guess two generations removed for them. Um, and that either looking directly at those individuals and talking to them or looking in the history books will give them important information about how to construct a social movement today, right? So if you remember a couple years ago, there was this labeling of Black Lives Matter activists as identity extremists, I think was the label, right?
you're
And
correct.
so the ways that, yeah, Black identity extremists,
Yep, spot on.
yeah, the ways that the government was monitoring people and categorizing people in the Black Lives Matter movement was very similar to what had been done to Black Power activists, right? And so it's important to talk to those elders, to read that information, to better understand the ways that the government engages in repression, the ways that the American citizenry engages in repression and efforts to halt those movements for social justice, to understand and create strategies that are going to be effective in contemporary society.
Wow. Okay. One last question. What, how do you believe everything that has transpired over the past 9 months, how is that going to, how do you believe that that's going to affect um, engagement of our young people? Do you think that there was just so much negativity that that is going to push them away where they will basically go within their own shell? Or do you think that what they have witnessed and all of the mistakes and all of the anger, do you think that that will bring them out to say, you know what, there's a better way and I'm going to lead that way?
I'm going to say the latter, um, because I have faith in young people. And I think that many social movements have benefited from the input and activism of young people. But I also think that young people bring to the table what is necessary for us to move forward, and that's creativity and ingenuity and thinking outside the box. What we have done hasn't worked, right? It hasn't worked for the masses of people. It's worked for some folks, right? Because what we have is a white supremacist, patriarchal, heterosexist nation. That is who we are as Americans. We shouldn't want to be that way. And that's only benefiting,
A
a
small
small
group.
segment of the population. And so, what we're going to have to do is to create something new, create something that hasn't existed before in this country, something perhaps we can't even envision right now. And I think that young people have the potential to to envision something new and to put it into practice. Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, I lied. This is my last question. If if we lived in a perfect world, I know we do not, but if we did, and the cycle and the cycles were broken, how long do you think real change takes to not only enact, but to take hold, where it is where it is commonplace, where you don't even know, oh my God, that never, that really happened. I can't believe that. This is the way that I've always, how long do you think before we get to that point?
I can't put a, excuse me, I can't put a year on it, but I know that it would take time because the oppressions that exist in our society, they're not just legislative, right? We have been indoctrinated with ideas about white supremacy and about sexism and about homophobia. That is part of the air we breathe, right? That's why there's all of this information about implicit bias, because those ideas, those stereotypes about
Mm.
certain groups of people have just become kind of unfortunately intuitive to the way that we think, right? We make these assumptions about people based on the stereotypes that we have. And so part of what is necessary is also then um, kind of getting rid of, disabusing ourselves of the indoctrination, the socialization that we've been subjected to. And that's not something that's going to happen overnight, right? If everything in society is feeding you this information about how Black people are, how Latinos are, how women are, or how trans people are, then it's going to take a very long time for everybody collectively to let go of those ideologies.
Okay.
So, years, I think.
So decades. I mean, and that's why when you were talking about the um, the young people and being engaged, I'm thinking it has to be for the young. It has to be um, uh, uh, younger people doing this and at the forefront, because it it is, for lack of a better word, it's a struggle, and struggles usually are not something that um, are done in 45 minutes plus commercials, are
Mhm.
not done uh, in a uh, eight an 8 segment miniseries. It is years. I mean, I think the one piece that keeps coming in my head, and yes, I was trying to work this in because I promised my wife that I would work it in, is um, when the Brown versus the Board of Education, Topeka Board of Education, um, when that ruling came down, but then when it went down to state level, and the states, some of the southern states said, with all deliberate speed, who knew that that decision was made in 1954, and there were some states that were in 1970 that were still trying to enact, delay that, and it just, I couldn't imagine one person trying to fight that all by themselves and having that energy and the time and all of that, that it truly does take a village, and it truly does take young people to be able to fight and to continue to carry this on, because it it it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and I would need a break. I mean, I'm not saying I would give up, but I would need a break sometime. I need somebody else to carry the mantle for a little bit. Am I
Yeah.
wrong with that, or am I
No,
again?
it was never just one person. I mean, even though that's unfortunately the way we think about the civil rights movement, we think about Martin Luther King Jr. as the leader. He was a leader in the movement. There were many leaders in the movement in many communities across the country. There's no way that that movement could have been sustained with one, two, or even just five leaders. There were people in every community who were leaders who were sustaining that movement. And we were just talking about Brown today in class, and that was intentional, right? So Brown 1 was this unanimous decision, but Brown 2, the second part of it, was the compromise that delayed it. And they knew what they were doing, right? They knew that that phrase, without deliberate speed, it was a concession to racism, unfortunately, to a certain extent, saying, we know segregation has been in place for years, so take as long as you need. We know you can't do this overnight. And so, what do some districts say? All right, we really don't have to do this. Mississippi, in Jackson, they didn't desegregate until 1964, and then they started with the first grade, right? And then, like you said, some school districts didn't desegregate until the 1970s. And so, on the one hand, you have this policy, this Supreme Court decision saying that it's unconstitutional to
Institutional.
have segregated schools, but then you have this compromise, this concession that says, okay, it may be unconstitutional, but you don't have to address it right away, right? And as long as we continue to have that type of mentality, as long as we're willing to make concessions with white supremacy or misogyny, or homophobia, we're not going to get where we need to be, right? You can't compromise with oppression, and you can't compromise with, when I say that, with any oppression, right? So you can't say, well, all right, I'm anti-racist, but women shouldn't be doing this, right? And so we also have to understand that all of these forms of oppression are intertwined, and they are reinforcing each other. And when we claim to be anti-oppression, we have to be against all oppressions and have to work towards dismantling all of them simultaneously.
It's a big job. It's a it's a
It's a
it,
huge job.
it's it it almost staggering. But as you said, if taken in pieces and taken in something that you care about and that you have the passion for, then if you can work to enact change within that little sphere, then you can build out from there.
Right.
And wow, wow. And see, and as I will tell my viewers, every single time that I stick my head in Dr. Morris's office and I ask a question, I I always feel like when I come out, I'm ready to write a thesis paper. And I'm like, I'm ready to go back to school and get my doctorate, because now I have the passion. I know the direction, and now she's given me the tools in which to be able to do it. that's the way that I always feel. So once again, Dr. Morris, I know you got to go. Thank you so much for giving up a little bit of your time, um, and answering my questions, and my wife's question. Um, it's always, as always, it's always so educational and insightful, and you do it in such a way that I don't feel like that small, that I get it, and you have least, and you've also given me a direction in which, okay, this is how I could get started. So,
Well, thank you. I always appreciate our conversations and enjoy them. Yeah.
well, well, thank you again, and I'm gonna try and stop that. Yay, I did it.